in the mid-teens across much of England and Wales.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
A new study has found that almost 8 in 10 of Gen Z Brits believe that the romantic poems of Shakespeare, Keats, Barrett Browning and the rest are outdated and irrelevant. Can we re-engage youngsters with such verse? Can the Gen Z audience become infatuated with love poetry? Joining me now is the Professor and Chair of English at the University of Virginia, Andrew Stauffer. Andrew, welcome to GB News. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
What is it that a poet does with language and in love, with language and with love, to express love better than any other way in which it can be expressed?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it is, it's relying on language as being the primary way that we get in touch with our feelings, that, poetry is the language art par excellence. And so it's the assumption that the more we can use our words to talk about our feelings, the deeper, more pleasurable, more available those feelings actually are to us. And so in a certain way, reading poetry, not only we recognize our feelings, we even catch feelings from art, from poems, from songs, from stories. There's a way that even our own most personal relationships are structured by the culture that we have grown up in and that we've been immersed in. And so it really can be an aid, or at least a transformative experience to encounter language, to give yourself words for your own very private feelings that turns out have been felt by other people going all the way back to Sappho and Catullus and Horace and through Shakespeare and through the whole English tradition. So that can be galvanizing as well, really kind of eye-opening to know that you're not alone in your feelings.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
So we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. What a week it's been in Westminster, not least within the Reform UK party itself. I'm going to be joined by the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, to discuss the allegations made about Rupert Lowe's behaviour and about how the party has dealt with the events in the last 48 hours. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, will be here. I'm going to be asking him about Labour's plans to reform the civil service. Is this Sir Keir Starmer's attempt at America's coveted Doge? I'll also be speaking to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, as the Conservatives table an amendment to prevent the Human Rights Act interfering in policies to tackle immigration. People's Deputy of Ukraine, Oleksiy Goncharenko, will join me from Kyiv ahead of the Ukraine-US peace talks in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. And after it emerged that triple killer Carl Clifford watched Andrew Tate videos before his deadly attack, I'll be talking about violence against women and girls with Heather Binning, a founding member of the Women's Rights Network. As ever, we've got 90 minutes of punchy politics to come. Do not even think of going anywhere. But before all that, with me now to review the Sunday front pages is the deputy and US editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. Freddie, lovely to see you this morning.
Good morning,
I think this is your debut on my show, so welcome.
It is.
Right, papers full of, as you can imagine, the reform in fighting. So we've got Nigel Farage writing for the Sunday Telegraph in defence of some of the claims that Rupert Lowe has been making in his own defence on X. It's all getting very public, this, Freddie. I do question the wisdom of dirty laundry being washed so publicly, but what's Farage saying?
Farage is trying to, I think, get out ahead of it all, in a way, and say, you know, nobody likes this infighting. I'm nipping it in the bud now. This is why we had to deal with Rupert Lowe. It doesn't look great for reform. That's obviously true. However, I do think the Reform Party are right to say that the Tory party are enjoying this a bit too much, that lots of commentators who don't like reform are trying to sort of create a major split in the party. Whereas if you talk to a lot of people in reform, I think that there was an acknowledgement that ever since Rupert Lowe got retweeted by Elon Musk, then he went a little bit the ego. I mean, he says Farage has got a messianic complex. I believe Rupert Lowe's messianic complex might be quite significant.
This could be a battle of the egos. So, yes, just to remind everyone, Elon Musk suggested that actually Nigel Farage didn't have what it takes to lead reform because he said he wouldn't welcome Tommy Robinson into the movement. Elon Musk, along with other US figures like Jordan Peterson, has tried to give Tommy Robinson a voice, saying he's kind of the victim of overzealous police and judicial activity, and making the point that he has spoken up for the victims of the rape gangs.
And he kept retweeting Rupert Lowe. So the interesting thing there is Lowe started to actually obviously create content on X that was fishing for an Elon Musk retweet. And so he went into the sort of Robinson territory.
But the timing of this is curious, and I'm going to be asking Richard Tice this, the deputy leader, when he comes on the show a little later. It does seem odd that these allegations apparently refer to something that happened in December, and then they bring out that statement within hours of Rupert Lowe giving an interview to our GBNews colleague Andrew Pearce for the Daily Mail, questioning Nigel Farage's fitness to be Prime Minister. The timing is curious, Freddie.
It's not curious. I mean, it's just very obvious, isn't it?
It's very obvious.
It's very obvious. And what's funny about it is nobody's actually talking about the allegations. Nobody's got any interest in these allegations, really.
No.
It's just obviously they've had enough of Lowe. They want to get rid of him. They've been sitting on this for a while, one suspects, and they just did it this week after that interview.
We shall be investigating the matter further with Richard Tice a little later. Let's move on to the front page of the Mail on Sunday. Welcome to the UK. Gunman who says death to all Jews. What's this about, Freddie?
This is about someone called Abu Wadi, who, interestingly, the Home Office has no idea where he is, it seems, or are not willing to tell us.
This is a question for Pat McFadden.
It is a question.
Up later. Where is this guy who wants Jews to be killed, was associated with Hamas, pictured with AK-47s, gets escorted to British shores by the UK Border Force? How wonderful for him.
Exactly. And it's not the only one of these cases that we've read about in recent months. There are quite a few obvious militants who are not being turned away. They're actually being welcomed into the country, it seems. I mean, it also ties in rather nicely with a story on the front page of the Telegraph about how Palestinian groups...
The Times.
Sorry, Times. No, I'm getting muddled. Sorry.
No, go on.
No, there's Russia's plot.
That's right.
This is it, Russia's plot. So what we're seeing is that authoritarian countries are keen to use migration as a weapon of war. And so what a lot of these migrants that are coming through are being sort of funneled through by China and Russia. And it's a very dangerous dynamic that our government isn't dealing with.
So to just destabilise European countries, create divisions between populations, probably distract Europe with this idea of keeping the migrant numbers down, then they're turning a blind eye to other more perhaps significant foreign policy issues. Is that what this is all about?
Yes. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the Ukraine war, I went there, and there was a huge line of migrants from all over the world queuing up outside to Ukraine to get into Poland. And they've been bussed in from Belarus, obviously an ally of Russia. And so what's going on there is that Putin and Belarus are saying we'll use migrants to create instability in Europe, to create political problems in Europe. And that's been going on for a long time.
Well, we'll talk about the relationship between Putin and Trump in just a minute, because there's an interesting piece by Dan Hodges in the Mail on Sunday. Before that, though, you did refer to the Sunday Times front page story. Now, this is about this group, Palestine Action. We've just had a pro-Palestinian activist removed from Big Ben yesterday, which seems to me to be posing serious questions about the security of the Houses of Parliament. And now we've got this expose about how much devastation, really, Palestine Action has been causing. It's had 356 direct actions since 2020, causing millions of pounds worth of damage. Tell me more.
Well, you would have thought, wouldn't you, that it would be possible to clamp down on Palestine Action, but it doesn't seem to happen. They seem to be able to act almost with impunity.
What sorts of things do they do?
They vandalised Donald Trump's golf course, which is probably not the most serious thing they've done. They target defence companies and groups that they think are helping to fund the war in Israel. And they are clearly there to cause as much instability. Their goal is to cause as much instability with any group that they associate with Israel, clearly anti-Semitic. And it's not something that a government is getting a grip on. And why not is the question.
Well, why do you think it isn't? I mean, there's been an interesting debate, actually, since October the 7th about this sort of hands-off approach, particularly with the pro-Palestinian marches. I mean, the point was made to me recently that there is something hugely ironic about people being able to wave, for instance, the Hezbollah flag down the streets of our capital when it's actually banned in Middle Eastern countries. Why do you think the government hasn't done enough about both pro-Palestinian marchers who seem to be sailing too close to the wind on terrorist support and indeed groups like Palestine Action?
Well, I think, I mean, at the Labour Party level, I think there is a lot of sympathy there for groups like Palestine Action. There's a sense that Israel has behaved very badly, and therefore this anger is justified, even if it means committing illegal acts, inciting hatred and destroying property.
Let's move on to the piece that I just mentioned earlier. Dan Hodges and Glenn Owen in the Mail on Sunday, talking about how our spies are worried Washington will blow their cover to Moscow. Freddie, you're very experienced in sort of US matters. Unpick this for us, because there's quite a lot of suggestion now that there are concerns or growing concerns about intelligence sharing between us and Washington because of perceived links between Trump and Russia, which is strange and worrying.
I find this story absolutely fascinating because it feels a little bit like, from the British point of view, that we're going back to 2017, 2018, when everybody was saying Trump was some sort of Russia asset. That was mostly proved to be baloney. But the Brits now are trying to sort of raise, British intelligence services are trying to raise this alarm again. Why are they doing that? It's because the Americans have said, we don't think Britain should share intelligence with Ukraine, and therefore we're going to stop sharing intelligence with Britain to a certain extent. So the Five Eyes intelligence partnership, which is crucial to Britain, is suddenly convulsed. And so I think what you're getting here is Glenn Owen and Dan Hodges are speaking to British intelligence sources who are reviving this story of like, oh, well, actually, we can't trust Trump, we can't trust the Americans. But what's actually going on, I think, is that the Americans are saying, we're not sure we can trust the Brits. And remember what the Brits did, because it was Christopher Steele, a British spy, who was behind all the Russiagate Trump stuff at the beginning. And so while Tim Shipman's written about it today, there's interesting things going on between the UK and the US at the sort of public level. Healy going to America this week.
Got on quite well with Pete Hegseth.
Apparently the meeting went very well. The meeting between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump went very well.
Yes.
But underneath that, you've got these discontent between the intelligence agencies. You've got quite a lot of backstabbing going on. You've got apparently Donald Trump being very upset about the King seeing Zelensky just after their big blow-up. And so it reminds me a little bit of Theresa May with Donald Trump.
Yes.
Where at first everything was nice. There was a nice meeting in Washington, exactly. And it didn't take long for that to unravel, because I think the British political class can't really handle Donald Trump. They want to try to handle Donald Trump, but they can never quite do it.
Can anyone handle Donald Trump? That's the question.
Very good question.
From real-life spies to fictional ones Yet more discussion about who should be the next James Bond, Freddie. Let's stick to the important matters of the day. So the Telegraph
Richard Tice, you're about to interview him.
Well, Richard Tice might be a pretender to the throne, let's be honest. He likes to consider himself to be smooth and suave. But let's have a look at some of the contenders here. Some of them I recognise, some of them I didn't. So Aaron Taylor-Johnson is there, as is James Norton, who I must say I have got a soft spot for, I've got to be honest. We've also got Andrew Garfield. I'm sorry, he's not a Bond, is he?
I didn't know anything about Andrew Garfield.
Well, when did he enter the fray? And you made the point, why isn't Theo James from The Gentleman and indeed Series 2 of White Lotus?
Yes, before I sound too keen on Theo James, I'll say my wife is very keen on him.
Yes, I think most people's wives are very keen on Theo James.
He's very good looking, and he's got a sort of British atmosphere about him, which I think you need for a Bond character. Although, do you? Because the fear now is that Amazon are going to pick either an American or perhaps a woke figure.
No Americans, no woke Bonds. We just can't do it.
But can Amazon be trusted with the Bond franchise?
Final important question, Freddie. Best Bond of all time?
Sean Connery.
Yeah.
No.
I'm close to saying Pierce Brosnan, but only because we had the girls backstage had a little discussion about how good-looking he was earlier. Freddie Gray, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. Low pressure still dominates western parts of the Mediterranean. Outbreaks of showers, heavy rain, some strong winds as well. Temperatures a little below average for the time of year. Through Monday, showers across the west, some longer spells of rain, Spain and Portugal there. Showers across into Italy, temperatures in the mid-teens. But the best of the dry weather across Greece, across into Turkey as well. Plenty of sunny spells here. And the outlook for is it to improve a little with temperatures rising too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Getting into medicine at a very early age, you had an interest when you were really, really young, didn't you?
I did. I decided to go to medicine when I was 8. And that was based on the stories my father used to tell me about my grandfather, who I never met, because my grandfather died when he was 11.
Yeah.
And he was in the military, and he was stationed up in the Himalayas, and he was a doctor in the military. And not only did he serve in the military, but he also served his patients. And he served them to the degree where he would go out and he'd take them supplies, and he'd really look after them and make sure that they were not just well, but could live and survive. And it was on a day when he was out there helping his patients. There was a storm up in the Himalayas, and he was out there taking blankets and clothes and food up to them. And on the way back, as he was coming down the Himalayas, there was a landslide which took his Jeep over the edge, and he perished in that. So he gave his life to his service. And it was these stories about my grandfather, what he did and how he helped people, that really inspired me to follow in his footsteps. Not necessarily to go into the military, but to go into medicine.
But he's left a wonderful legacy, because fast forward, you came to this country when you was 4, and you've studied medicine.
Yep.
And you do, we were talking earlier about DNA. You're looking at DNA, looking at people's DNA. You can do profiles on people, predict. Well, you can actually say with some accuracy where they've lived in the past, what jobs they've done, and what medically may happen to them in the future.
Yeah. And I think, over the last, we've been looking at the gene. There was a Human Genome Project last century, which finished.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Joining me now is the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden. Minister, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you very much for your time, as ever. You've committed yourself to cutting the cost of the civil service, which has an annual salary bill of £16.6 billion. The workforce consists of 500,000 full-time employees, which begs the question, how many civil servants are you going to cut?
I don't want to set out a figure like that, Camilla, because it's been done before and it hasn't worked. You might remember the Conservatives said they would cut the number of civil servants by 90,000, I believe it was, and then hiring went up. What I want to do is something different, which is to make sure that we get the best bang for the buck for the public, to make sure that where people want to see more people, for example, teachers in the classroom or police officers on our streets, that we get the resources there, but we also use both new technology and good performance management to get the good civil servants, which is the vast majority of the people I work with, to do their jobs better, and where it's not working out, where we can have a process where people leave. These are some of the reforms that we'll be setting out this week. It's really important that the state reforms itself while the private sector is changing. If we think of the way that we do business in the private sphere, we can't have the state left behind.
Okay.
That's in all our interests, and that's what I want to do.
All right, but surely you have to cut down the numbers here. We had 380,000 civil servants back in 2016. The country still ran okay. Services were still provided. So why can't you bring the numbers down considerably?
Well, I think we can bring the numbers down, and those
by how
rises
many?
that you've read out, they happened under the Conservative government, and I sort of asked myself, you know, what were they, you know, what was the intention behind that? And when I ask what's the, you know, behind the rise in that number, two things are always quoted to me. People say Brexit, and they say COVID. Now, I understand that after Brexit, there was probably some bureaucracy that used to be done in Europe that's now being done in the UK, and we needed more people for that. That'll be part of it. I also understand that we hired more people during COVID, but COVID was 5 years ago, and we're long past the pandemic now. So nobody from the previous regime has really been able to explain to me why they hired an extra 130,000 people. So I want to make sure that we get the best value for money for the taxpayer. The state has taken on some things it hasn't done before. There have been some changes in policy, for example, on the probation service, which has meant bringing some things back in-house. That will explain some of it, but what's really important is to get the best value for money for people, make sure these are good jobs that people want to do, and make sure that when we use public resources, it's where the public really want to see it. And that's why we fought the elections saying, let's hire more teachers, let's hire more police officers, let's make sure that when taxpayers are paying in, they get a good outcome. That's what we want to see.
I know, but you can't afford to hire more frontline workers if you don't get rid of more civil servants. I don't understand why you can't even give us a rough idea of numbers. Government sources have talked about 10,000, but that would only be a drop in the ocean, wouldn't it?
Let me talk about my own department, for example. It's grown hugely in size since the last time I was in government. We started a voluntary exit programme before Christmas there. That will get rid of about 400 people. There may be other similar things in other departments too, but I don't think accrued headcount is the correct way to do it, because what you want is a civil service that's the right size for your policies, rather than just saying we've got to have X number of people.
Are too many civil servants working at home?
Well, I'm a bit old-fashioned on this, Camilla, I have to say, and I prefer people to be in the office because I think they learn from one another better, and you get that friendship and social capital, and I think you do your job better. But we're flexible about this. There are, of course, reasons why some people might want to work from home on some days, and that's built into the system. But if you ask me my own view, I quite like people being in the office.
OK, so you want to bring more civil servants back to the office. Can we confirm that, Mr McFadden?
Well, we've got a target. We stick to that. But I would say to anyone who's starting a new job, if they ask, will I learn more by being in the office? I would say yes, you will, and you'll develop better as a worker.
Sir Keir Starmer has indicated that Labour is going to block a legal ban on first cousins being able to marry in England and Wales. Why is that? Is the Prime Minister in favour of interbreeding?
Look, I'm not aware of him being so definite on that.
So you will block this?
I think these issues arise. I don't, think we're going to adopt that position on this question.
Sorry, what position are you adopting on first cousins marrying? What position is Labour adopting on the issue of whether first cousins should marry in England and Wales? Should they or shouldn't they?
Well, I don't think we're planning a legal change on whatever the current position is on that at the moment. Not that I'm aware of.
So, at the moment, it's not legally banned for first cousins to marry in England and Wales, despite the obvious health implications of interbreeding. Richard Holden is suggesting a legal ban on first cousins marrying, and at the moment it looks like Labour might block that. Why? Labour cannot possibly be in favour of first cousins marrying, can they?
Well, I'm not aware of our plans to change the current law at the moment on that question. If we are planning to change the law, and I promise I'll come back on your programme and talk to you about it. But as of today, I'm not aware that we're planning a legal change on that issue.
OK, but do you think first cousins should be able to marry in England and Wales?
Well, as a minister, I'm not planning to change the law on that right now.
But Mr McFadden, what do you think? Should they be allowed to?
Then I'll come back on.
But should they be allowed to? It's a simple yes or no question. I don't think first cousins should be able to marry in England and Wales. What do you think?
You're the first person ever to ask me the question.
OK, so answer it.
When the government's got a position of changing the law, I'll happily come back and talk to you about it.
But what do you think? Do you think first cousins should be able to marry in England and Wales?
Well, that's the current law as it stands, I think. We're not planning to change the law on that. As far as I know, if there's a change in that and the government decides to change the law, then I'll happily come back on and talk to you about it.
OK, so you don't seem to be willing to answer that question. Let's go on to David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary. He's personally intervened to support this controversial new Chinese embassy in London because, quotes, it would be in Beijing's interests. Why on earth, in the current climate, is the Labour government making decisions that would be in Beijing's interests?
Look, we'll have to have a proper process on this application for a new Chinese embassy. That's not reached its conclusion yet.
But Lammy's supporting
in terms of relations with China.
Why?
But that's not the end of the story. There has to be a proper process in deciding whether or not the embassy should go ahead. But look, on relations with China, this is an important economic power in the world. We have to recognise that. There's a lot of British trade with China, so we want that trade to continue, but we're also alive to the security
carry out human rights abuses, don't they,
we'll always
the Chinese?
Protect the people.
Why would you do anything that's in Beijing's interests?
That's the case. On human rights, we constantly raise these things when we meet Chinese officials and ministers, and it's possible to do that and to challenge on these things while also understanding that it is simply not possible for the UK to say, we'll never talk to China, we won't trade with China.
It's not about not talking to them, it's about allowing them to have a super embassy in Tower Hamlets.
Well, they've already got an embassy in the country. If they want a different one,
why do they need a new one then?
We'll take the decision in the normal way. We have an embassy in China too. The way that diplomatic relations work, you often have embassies in countries around the world where you might not approve of everything that that country does.
Okay.
That is a fact of modern diplomacy. You
All
don't
right.
always get to treat with people who you agree with on everything. And it's in Britain's interests both to challenge China on the security grounds, but also to have an economic relationship with them. We cannot simply turn away and say, we're not talking to this group, we're not talking to that group. That's not a proper trade policy for the country.
All right, Pat McFadden, time has run away with us, I'm afraid. We need to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
What a shame. We could have covered more subjects.
We always enjoy it, don't we? All right, and more to come because the Deputy Leader of Reform, UK, Richard Tice, will be here in just a jiffy. Do not move a muscle.
You could have £17,777 in tax-free cash to play with this spring. Cash to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we're also going to give you not one, but two sought-after designer watches and the latest Mulberry handbag. How would winning that sound? For a chance to win the cash, 2 watches and the designer bag, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News. Lots more still to come this morning. The Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, will be with me in the studio. I'm going to be asking him about the allegations made against Rupert Lowe and whether he thinks Nigel Farage is a messiah who can't delegate. I'll also be speaking with People's Deputy of Ukraine, Oleksiy Goncharenko, ahead of the US-Ukraine talks in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. And after it emerged that triple killer Carl Glifford watched Andrew Tate videos before his deadly attack, I'll be talking about so-called toxic masculinity with Heather Binning, a founding member of the Women's Rights Network. But first, here's your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Camilla, thank you very much and good morning to you. Just after 10 o'clock, the top story. Underperforming civil servants could be incentivised to leave their jobs under government plans to overhaul the service. Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden says it's not match fit for what the country needs and is promising a shake-up where top officials' pay is linked to performance. The government, though, insists it will create a more focused and productive civil service, but unions say it's just a soundbite with no real plans for change. McFadden is expected to outline the reforms next week. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has defended suspending MP Rupert Lowe, warning constant infighting damages political parties. Writing in The Telegraph, Farage said that Lowe's public criticism had dented party unity and called it inconceivable to ignore bullying allegations and threats against the party. Claims that Lowe strongly denies. Now sitting as an independent, Lowe insists there's zero credible evidence and labels Farage's account as entirely false and poisonous. An independent inquiry is now underway as Reform's 5 MPs drop to 4 amid the escalating divisions. The Conservatives want to stop the Human Rights Act from applying to immigration cases, making it harder for people to challenge deportation in UK courts. The leader, Kemi Badenoch, says some foreign criminals and illegal migrants have used the act to stay in Britain, while her party is pushing for an amendment to the government's border security bill to shift power over immigration from judges to Parliament. The Home Office source has called the idea totally unworkable and blamed the Tories for leaving the asylum system in chaos. Labour, though, says it is focused on increasing removals, cutting asylum hotel costs and tightening how human rights laws are applied. In other news this morning, the Mail on Sunday has revealed evidence of Hamas-supporting migrants arriving in the UK. Abu Wadi, a Palestinian migrant, previously called for death to all Jews and posed with a string of pictures with weapons and depicting battles with Israel. He arrived in the UK after being picked up on a dinghy crossing the English Channel. And the UK is set for its warmest weekend of the year so far, with parts of the country hotter than Spain and Italy. Temperatures could hit 20 degrees in central England today, while parts of the north and Wales could reach very close, 19 degrees. That is warmer than Marbella, Ibiza and even Sorrento on the Amalfi Coast, where they're experiencing highs of just 15 degrees. But the mild spell won't last, with temperatures dropping from Tuesday and wintry showers sweeping in. Some rural areas in Scotland could even see lows of -4 degrees. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you for a full roundup at 11 o'clock. Now, though, it's straight back to Camilla.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Lots more still to come. Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, will be here in the studio. I'll also be joined by Oleksiy Goncharenko, the People's Deputy of Ukraine, ahead of those crunch talks between the US and Ukraine in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. And Heather Binning from the Women's Rights Network will be here to discuss the influence of Andrew Tate after it emerged that triple killer Kyle Gifford watched Tate's videos before his deadly crossbow attack. But first, I'm joined by Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp. Mr. Philp, great to see you this morning. Thank you for your time. I would imagine that as Shadow Home Secretary, you're making inquiries about the whereabouts of Abu Wadi. This story appears on the front of the Mail on Sunday. I'm sure you're familiar with it. He was picked up by the UK Border Force on Thursday. He has previously called for the slaughter of all Jews. He's been photographed with AK-47s. He's a former member of Hamas. Do we think the Home Office knows where this guy is?
Well, I'll certainly be asking the Home Office that question. What the Home Office needs to do is identify where this despicable individual is and, frankly, remove him from the country back to Palestine immediately. He clearly has no place in the United Kingdom and potentially poses a threat to our fellow citizens. And this just illustrates why it is so important to get control of our borders and to stop these boat crossings. Unfortunately, since the general election, these boat crossings under Labour have gone up by about 28%. And these are the kind of people that Labour are now letting into the country.
Although, can we just have a frank admission? Because, to be fair to him, the former Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, did say this week. No government can stop the boats, can they, Mr. Philp? The Tories didn't manage it. Labour aren't managing it now.
Well, Labour have completely lost control, as I said, and the numbers have gone up.
Did the Tories ever have control?
The Rwanda deterrent had it. Yeah, well, I'm just about to say, so the crossing numbers did actually go down in 2023. We did start getting the numbers down. And if the Rwanda deterrent had started as planned on the 24th of July last year, that was when the first flight was due to take off, then I think that deterrent would have worked. It stands to reason. If you're an illegal immigrant in France and you know if you cross the English Channel by dinghy to the UK, you are then going to get pretty much immediately removed somewhere else, be it Rwanda or elsewhere, then you're not going to bother crossing, are you? Now, we saw Australia about 10 years ago make a similar plan work. They called it Operation Sovereign Borders. We in government started returning Albanians back to Albania. They were the largest nationality crossing the channel, and when we started returning them, it went down by 93%. So those examples go to show that if you rapidly remove people that arrive, then they don't attempt the crossing in the first place. And that is why it was such a catastrophic mistake by the Labour government to cancel the Rwanda deterrent before it even started.
It could have been a catastrophic mistake by the Conservatives not to have got a grip on this issue earlier. We now have Sunak saying that we should leave the ECHR unless it is reformed and that we can't afford net zero. Why didn't he say this while he was in office? Why didn't the Tories bring in the Rwanda plan years ago if that was the way to stop the boats?
Well, obviously, the Rwanda plan was repeatedly challenged in the courts, and we had to actually pass a special bill through Parliament about a year ago called the Safety of Rwanda Act, which, by the way, the Labour government are about to repeal, which I think is a really stupid thing to do, because it means that if Labour do ever come to their senses and change their mind and decide to start the Rwanda scheme, as they should do, they will have destroyed the legislative, the legal basis to do so. So I can tell you now,
you could have done that, though. While the Tories were in office, Tories were in office, you could have repealed the Human Rights Act. This was a Tony Blair invention that has led to legal warfare against legitimate government policies by elected politicians. You could have done all this, and you didn't, and now we're in this mess.
So look, I mean, the case law coming out of the courts, including actually, or principally, in fact, UK courts, has got kind of worse and worse over the years. And it has, in my view, now got to the point where we do have to essentially disapply the Human Rights Act or repeal the Human Rights Act in relation to immigration matters. And that's an announcement Kemi and I are making this morning. And tomorrow, Monday, I will be tabling an amendment in Parliament to Labour's border bill, I call it the border surrender bill, to do exactly this. We're going to put it to a vote in committee firstly and then on the floor of the whole House, and we'll see if Labour will support our proposal. I will be voting in favour of it.
Well, they're not going to, are they?
We've had for too long now judges. Well, it's up there. We'll put them to the test. I'll be voting for it. I can tell you
could have done this while you were in office with an 80-seat majority.
Look, Camilla,
you had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. And now you're retrospectively trying to repeal the Human Rights Act when it comes to immigration. It doesn't make any sense.
So, Camilla, these cases over the years have got worse and worse and worse. We've seen just in the last few weeks Charles Hymas at the Telegraph and Matt Dayton at the Times exposing some of these recent judgments. So it's a problem that's been getting worse even in the last few months, let alone even the last few years.
Okay.
But frankly, looking back, yes, I would have wanted to repeal it. But look, we've got new leadership. We've got a new leader of the Conservative Party. You've got a new Shadow Home Secretary, which is me. And we are now proposing decisive action in this area. I'm going to be tabling that amendment tomorrow, and I'm going to be voting for it in Parliament.
Let's be decisive. You can tell me then, you've committed to a strict cap on immigration. What is it?
Well, I'm not going to shoot from the hip. We're going to come up with a properly thought-out number in due course, long ahead of the next election.
What is the number? You have had a long time to think of the number. You were in power for 14 years. You've now been in opposition for 6 months.
Camilla, we're not going to...
You must have a figure in your mind. What should immigration be capped at? We can all have a figure. I'm going to come up with one now and see whether this is feasible. 100,000.
Yeah, well, Camilla, I'm not going to shoot from the hip and just pluck a number out of thin air. I've been Shadow Home Secretary for just 3 or 4 months, so I'm not just going to shoot from the hip. We are going to think this through properly so it's credible. You know, we saw, Reform is a party that just shoots from the hip and doesn't think things through, as Rupert
at least it's been clear
last week. I'm not going to do that.
At least Reform's been clear. It said net zero migration. It's really clear.
Camilla, I'm going to think I'm going to think this. But by the way, that still implies about 500,000 people coming in each year. By the way,
okay.
So look,
Is that
I'm going to
too
think
many?
this through properly. I'm not going to shoot from the hip. What I will tell you is the number will be a lot lower than it has been recently, and a lot lower than recent forecasts.
I would have hoped so.
And
It's recently been 900,000.
And we're going to let me finish. And we're going to put down another amendment in Parliament, creating the legal mechanism for MPs every year to vote on what the legal cap should be. And again, we'll see if Labour vote for that or not. So we're going to create that legal mechanism for Parliament to decide, and then when the cap is met, the government would simply stop issuing new visas. So that's a proper legal mechanism that will have real teeth.
All right. I mean, I think people might be suspicious because you won't come out with the actual number. I appreciate you've been burned by the tens of thousands pledge. Long ahead of the next election, we're going to be clear about what that number is, and we're going to explain in detail how that number will work in each different area: family visas, work visas, the NHS, all the rest of it. We're working through that detail. But what I'm not going to do is just shoot from the hip and make up some number because it sounds good without having done the proper serious work. Well, I wouldn't want it to be made up. You have had quite a lot of time to think of a number, but let's move on. Now, why hasn't the whip been removed from Tory peer Lord Hamilton after he claimed that British Jews should pay for a Holocaust memorial because, quotes, they have an awful lot of money? The Conservatives themselves have said that his comments are completely unacceptable and, quotes, flagrantly anti-Semitic. Why is he still in the Lords then?
Well, that's obviously a matter for the House of Lords Chief Whip. That's for them to decide and to answer. But I do agree those comments. I think those comments are completely unacceptable. They're disgraceful. The Holocaust was a terrible, terrible stain on global history, and actually all of us together should remember that and honour the victims and critically learn the lessons. That's a matter for the House of Lords Chief Whip. But his comments, what I'll tell you is that his comments are completely unacceptable. I've told you his comments are completely unacceptable, and. Well, I'm not the Lord's Chief Whip, so that's not for me to decide. But those comments are, frankly, totally unacceptable.
OK. On reform...
That is my opinion. You asked me on my opinion, that's what it is.
Well, you haven't given me an opinion. You haven't said whether the whip should be removed or not. You've just delegated it to the person in charge of the Lords. But I'm just asking you as a Conservative. This is a fellow Conservative. It's flagrantly anti-Semitic. Should he have the whip removed? Just asking for your opinion on it. OK, well, I'm saying that's somebody else's decision, but I think the comments are completely disgraceful. Right, OK.
Reform.
Reform. Now, have you had any defections to the Tories? Have you had any members coming your way from Reform after this argument between Rupert Lowe and the rest of the party?
So I haven't seen the figures. What I do know is that we've won 5 times more by-elections in Reform since the election. And I also know that Rupert Lowe said last week what everyone else has been thinking, which is that Reform is essentially a protest party without properly thought-through ideas, led by, in Rupert Lowe's words, a Messianic leader. He said they're not a serious party.
Will you
and then what happened just a few hours later,
Rupert Lowe role in the Conservatives
he got kind of stabbed in the back. Well, I don't think he's applied to join, but he's been clearly stabbed in the back by his own party, and there's only 5 of them in Parliament, and they're fighting like rats in a sack already, just demonstrating that they don't have the serious ideas to take the country forward.
That phrase was once used about the Conservatives, wasn't it, Mr. Philp? Fighting like rats in a sack.
Well, it was once used, Camilla. Yes, it was once used. But if you look at the last few months since Kemi Badenoch became leader, you will have seen a party that actually is united. Okay. The infighting has ended, and we are united as a party, and we're developing serious ideas like the repeal of the Human Rights Act for immigration matters that we're announcing today. Right. And there are more announcements coming in the days ahead as well. We're doing the serious work to sort out these serious problems and oppose this awful Labour government that's lost control of our borders.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Well, coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. He's going to be here with me in the studio. You won't want to miss it. It's been quite the show already, so stay tuned. See you in just a moment.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The GB News
newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Why do you want to do this, my friend?
I want to raise awareness about what disabled people can do and try and change some perceptions on what is possible.
So, Craig, what happened to you when you were 18 years old? Because your life changed forever, didn't it, in Afghanistan?
It did, yeah. I was on routine foot patrol, and several feet in front of me was a Commando IED. They triggered it, and, yeah, triple amputee. Both legs and only the one hand.
And how did those injuries change your life, Craig?
Yeah, in the worst way possible, you know. Everything I loved was taken away from me. Windsurfing taken away, guitar taken away. Couldn't even hug my parents or speak in the first initial few weeks. So it was a complete flip upside down.
I'm wheelchair bound and I have been for 2 years. And I only concentrate on what I can't do. And you're actually coming at this from the opposite way and you're saying, if you're disabled, these are the things you can do.
I'd say to you, focus on how you can't do those things. So how to actually achieve the things that you're not saying you can do. And if you give it a bit of time and thought, I'm pretty sure you'd achieve it.
Wow. And then what's led you to this challenge now? I mean, travelling 6,000 nautical miles from Mexico to Japan by yourself.
My dad taught me how to sail when I was very young. And that lasted up until I joined the army. When I was injured, the doctors saying, you know, look, sports are pretty much a no-go. My dad refused to take that as a thing. He gave me the details to the Paralympic sailing coach, and then I was in the Paralympic team for a little while. I didn't go to any games, but that reintroduced me to sailing and what was possible in the sailing world.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News. With me now in the studio is the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice.
Good morning.
What a weekend you've had, Richard. OK, so let's get stuck into this. Did you release that statement about Rupert Lowe because he had fallen out with Nigel Farage and been critical about him in an interview with Andrew Pearce?
No, far from it. In fact, if anything, the opposite is true. Look, first of all, it's a great shame because, we've been doing so well and, Rupert's been doing some great work on particular issues that are of real importance to many people. Because unfortunately, there are serious allegations of bullying by 2 separate women that have been made to the parliamentary authorities,
which he denies.
That is a question of fact. And then quite appropriately, our chairman Zia Youssef, who's been working incredibly hard, he made the decision that actually the responsible thing to do was to launch an independent investigation by a KC, which was launched at the end of February. Hang on, you've asked me a question, let me answer. Right, the independent investigation. Rupert was told about that at the end of February, sometime before this interview appeared. So the timing might look coincidental, but it's actually the opposite, Camilla.
Richard, honestly, the timing doesn't just look coincidental, it looks a little bit malicious.
Well, I've just told you
the allegations refer to something that happened in December. And you decided to come out with it. No, let me finish my question, if you don't mind, because it is my show. You come out with a statement on Thursday after Rupert Lowe has questioned whether Nigel Farage is fit to be Prime Minister. There was no need to have released the statement immediately after that interview. These allegations refer to something back in December. So, of course, the timing looks deeply suspicious. And it suggests you've mishandled it.
Far from it. We've done the appropriate and responsible thing to do. There was a further threat made to Zia literally last week. So at the end of the day...
What's the nature of these threats?
I'm not going to go into any details of that, but ultimately, as chairman, Zia's got significant responsibilities. Imagine if we'd done the opposite. Imagine if we'd brushed this all under the carpet.
Well, you could have conducted an internal investigation and then revealed the findings. Even the KC in this seems to think that you put this statement out too early.
The reality is that we have been working incredibly hard. We're going up in the polls. But the truth is, hang on, hear me out. The truth is that these difficulties have been ongoing for some time. We hoped that they could be dealt with. For example, just before Christmas, there was a very unfortunate incident that I witnessed in the House of Commons between Rupert and the Labour Minister, which
was resolved in the end.
Well, but there was almost an altercation, and that was that was an indication
but
of.
The Speaker did draw a line under it. So
we did, but
that's not in this statement, is it? That
correct.
incident doesn't feature in the statement.
That is, there have been numerous other areas where, unfortunately, it's turned out not to be possible to work constructively with Rupert. And let me just give you an example.
Hang on, let me ask one question, please, because you are speaking a lot and you're not letting me ask the questions that our audience demands answers to. And I think that's right, because you know that there are a lot of reform supporters watching and listening to this. You say he hasn't cooperated with the investigation. He says he's been in communication with the KC. So has he cooperated or not?
Well, two sides might disagree.
Has he cooperated?
Quite properly, I'm not...
Has he spoken to the KC?
Quite properly, I'm not involved.
Has he spoken to the KC?
It sounds like it from what he says.
So why is the statement saying he hasn't cooperated?
I'm not involved with the day-to-day of things. What I know... Hang on. What I know is, for example, we're all working incredibly hard. We've got May elections on the 1st of May. And... whilst we're doing this hard work, for example, Rupert's not even been to our head office, just down the road, no interest in the May elections. We need a united team that is going to drive forward. We're heading in the polls.
If you need a united team, why are you airing all of this dirty washing in public?
It's not very united.
We've now got this unedifying war of words
of course it's unedifying.
Between Rupert Lowe on X, Nigel Farage in the Sunday Telegraph. It looks amateurish. You're meant to be a professional party. Are you a party of grievance or governance?
We are a party with the right policies to save this country. On things like mass immigration, on scrapping net stupidity.
Hang on. Of you, and you're fighting like rats in a sack. How on earth is Nigel Farage going to command hundreds of MPs, which is your aspiration for the next general election, if he can't keep 4 MPs in check?
Because the truth is, we're working incredibly hard. We're going to work the hardest over the next 4 years. We're going to have the best candidates and the best policies.
You're working hard.
Hang on. And that starts on May the 1st this year. Then it goes into the devolved nation elections next year. And we're going to prove it by results.
There's
That's
a history
what we're
here, though, isn't there? Because Rupert Lowe isn't the first person to complain about the one-man band nature of reform, Nigel Farage having a huge ego, this idea that he has got a kind of Messiah complex. That's also affected you because you were the leader of reform, you get pushed aside, Nigel Farage comes back. You've got to be honest that bred resentment within the party. I know it has, because I've got good sources close to it.
Completely the opposite. I was delighted and thrilled.
The opposite.
I'm the one who was thrilled and invited Nigel. I said, get stuck in, it's serious. I'd taken it from whatever, 0 or 1% to in the low teens. I knew that Nigel could drive it forwards. Without Nigel, none of us would have been elected. OK? And let's be clear. Let's look at where
you wouldn't
under
have been
Nigel's
elected without Nigel Farage.
Oh, I think it would have been. It would have been
Boston and Skegness.
I think it would have been really that much harder. Because
you are putting your seat's victory down to Nigel Farage,
the growth
even though you were leader of the party.
Well, during the election campaign, the point is that Nigel helped drive the awareness and growth of the party, and that's fantastic. And look at where we've grown to.
Why does he keep on falling out with people? He's falling out with Rupert Lowe, he's fallen out with Ben Habib. This is a point that's made about your leadership. You're regarded to have been collaborative. You're regarded to have had meetings weekly when you were leader about policy, membership, fundraising and media appearances. Conversely, Nigel Farage doesn't have any meetings. You don't have a shadow cabinet. Nobody is an official spokesman for different policy roles. So he can't delegate, can he?
There's 5 of us. So actually, essentially, we deal with all these issues. I talk about a variety, but when there's only 5 of you and you've got lots of issues...
So why did you hold meetings and he doesn't?
Well, actually, we do have meetings. And
the thing
is that, unfortunately, Rupert chose... not to go to head office, not to attend some of these meetings. The rest of us have been, we've been very involved. That's the reality. The focus now is on driving this growth forwards. That's what we're united about. That's what we're going to continue to do, and we're going to continue to succeed. And here's an example. Just yesterday, in my constituency, walking around, greeting people, not a single person mentioned it. Coming back on the train, not a single person. Do you know why? Because people want us to succeed. They want us to save this country. They want us to drive forward with the right policies that will make people better off.
People might be questioning whether you can save the country if you can't even save yourselves. This has been utterly unedifying for reform.
Of course, it's not Plan A. I've said it's sad, and it's unfortunate, but much better to deal with things early doors than to brush it under the carpet and hope it goes away.
If Rupert Lowe is exonerated by the inquiry, will he be allowed back into the party?
Let's see what happens.
He claims he's innocent. If he's exonerated, will he be allowed back into reform?
You have to be able to work with people. You have to be a team player, OK?
And it's a simple question, and I know you're good at answering questions, Mr Tice. If he's exonerated, is he welcome back in reform?
Well, the whip has been withdrawn, and we want team players that will unite. I am actually. The whip has been withdrawn, and that should be the assumption. We're driving forwards. We're not holding back. We've got a job to do. We've got hundreds of seats to win in May. We're not going to be distracted by this noise. And do you know what? I don't think the British people will be either.
Can we talk about Nigel Farage's ego? Has he been drinking too much MAGA Kool-Aid? Is he too close to Donald Trump to be objective? Because his popularity rating has actually dropped, according to YouGov, by 9 points since he didn't back Zelensky and Ukraine. Now, you came into this studio last week and you very much said, I've always been backing Ukraine. I've spoken in the House a number of times about the horrific situation that President Zelensky has had to deal with over the course of the last 3 years. Nigel Farage has been comparatively silent on that issue, and it's cost reform, hasn't it?
I don't think so, because Georgia poll
You don't think so?
Well, there's a poll out yesterday, Camilla, showing that we've gone up one, and we're 7 points ahead of the Tory.
But he isn't in line with the consensus on Ukraine, is he? Two-thirds of British adults support President Zelensky over President Trump. That includes 66% of reform voters. He can't claim to be the people's politician if he's against the consensus. And this could be because he's too close to Trump to be objective.
No, I think it's actually, I think it's the opposite. I think we have stood rock solid with Ukraine. We have, as I said on the programme last week, been rock solid behind the challenges that President Zelensky...
Nigel Farage has been rock solid behind Ukraine.
We at Reform... The point is...
Why are you saying that? He hasn't been.
No, look, at the end of the day, Nigel, quite rightly, as have I, have said the ultimate objective has to be a lasting peace with strong, robust security guarantees.
He hasn't been rock solid behind Ukraine, and that's the problem.
I'm sorry, Camilla, that's completely wrong.
You're saying that Nigel Farage has been rock solid behind Ukraine.
We've always said...
when he was praising Putin as a great leader, when he was talking about the Russian bear being poked by the expansion of the European Union and NATO.
Patently not the case. Nigel and I have been rock solid that Putin is the aggressor, he is an evil dictator, and Ukraine has been illegally invaded, and we've got to do the best we can to get a lasting peace with strong security guarantees. That's the critical... All the noise around how you get there, we quite rightly said, the scenes in the White House was regrettable and unfortunate.
Regrettable, he called it a spat. He didn't make any criticism of the US president when he called President Zelensky a dictator.
Literally.
He didn't criticise him for that. Is he objective enough on Trump? Yes or no, Nigel Farage?
Here's the point. Do you know what, actually?
Is he?
Here's the point.
No, I'm asking a question.
Yeah, and I'm answering it. If world leaders like Trump, like Zelensky, are trying to get to a peace, then actually our job is not to criticise every nuance of every day of every discussion. Do you know what it's to do? It's to actually provide support. So that's why I've been suggesting, when you've got all the cards on the table, you have these negotiations behind closed doors, including the critical card, I think the important card, of the $300 billion of frozen assets, right, that is in Western banks that we need to use as part of that.
If Nigel Farage wants to be Prime Minister, admittedly, I mean, there could be wasted votes in this devotion to the Donald, because he won't be in office by the time we have the next general election. But people expect him to be objective about the US president, not be a president's poodle.
And that's why he said that what went on in the White House was regrettable. But the thing is not to focus on that, is focus on the objective. Focus on the key target, which is an enduring peace, and Nigel has spoke at length about security
Final
guarantees.
question. What are the names of the two councillors who have defected to Reform in Glasgow, Mr Tice?
John Gray and Ross Lambie.
And which councils did they belong to
Renfrewshire
before?
and South Lanarkshire. It was great. I was under a lot of pressure. There was a lot going on, including the Rupert situation. And sometimes you can't quite get it always right. And I apologise for that. I was caught out.
You have taken one for the team today in doing the broadcast round after a difficult morning, so I do genuinely appreciate your time and thank you for answering all of my questions. Well, thank you very much to Richard. Coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to the People's Deputy of Ukraine, Oleksiy Goncharenko, ahead of those peace talks in Saudi Arabia tomorrow between the US and the Ukraine. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's very emotional. It's designed to shock. What do you want people to take away from that advert?
I think, very sadly, a lot of people don't realise the violence and death that's prevalent in the dairy industry. For a cow to produce milk, she needs to be made pregnant, and then for humans to have that milk, the calves are snatched away. So that goes on for around 5 years. The cows are made pregnant every year. Terrible diseases occur because they are producing 10 times more milk than is natural. And then they are killed. The calves that are taken away, if they're male calves, are shot. And for the female calves, just like their mums, they're going to go through the same thing.
We've got Kelly Seaton here, who appears to have a cow nudging you, Kelly, behind you. That cow looks quite content with you.
The industry has worked incredibly hard. We have an excellent resource in that we can use semen. So actually, the amount of bull calves that are born is a lot less than what it used to be. We're working really hard to ensure that every calf goes down the right route. So actually shooting bull calves isn't a practice that takes place any longer.
We can be kind, we should be kind.
And I'm kind to my kids by giving them cow's milk, which is full of vitamins A, magnesium, zinc, B12, calcium, vitamin D. This is stuff that children need to grow, isn't it, Kelly? And I think what my problem is, Ben, is that your commercial is all about emotion. It's manipulating. It's not facts. You're not laying out facts about the dairy industry.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Joining me now is the People's Deputy of Ukraine, Oleksiy Goncharenko. Mr. Goncharenko, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Do we think that Russia has stepped up its attacks against Ukraine in light of that very difficult meeting at the Oval Office between President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance and President Zelensky?
I think Russia increased their attacks on Ukraine as a result not of the meeting itself, but of the consequences of this meeting, stopping American military aid to Ukraine and pause in sharing of intelligence data. Now Russia tries to exploit this time and this opportunity like they did a year ago when it was also paused in American military supply because of the debates in the Congress. Now they try to do something similar.
And what's the view in Ukraine, Mr. Goncharenko? Is it that President Zelensky mishandled this meeting?
I think you can ask many people and you will hear different answers. Many people support him and rallying around him. Some people, including me, I think he mishandled this meeting. And I think that leaders should deliver, first of all. And he came to the White House not to argue with the American president, but to cooperate and to find the ways to do this. And the end is catastrophic. We lost this support. Could it be another way if he would behave another way? I don't know, but maybe it would be a chance at least. But we have what we have. And unfortunately, I think this meeting strengthened those in entourage of President Trump, because there are different people there. There are very good people in Ukraine and interested in Europe, but there are other people. And unfortunately, this meeting last Friday, it encouraged those skeptics and pro-Putin people in his entourage.
Yes. And what are we to make of President Trump's people apparently meeting in secret with opposition MPs in Ukraine? Now, I know you are an opposition MP. I'm not sure if you've been involved in any talks with Trump's people, but we know a number of different opposition MPs in Ukraine have been.
No, it's more rumors. I mean, I am involved in talking with American congressmen, senators, former and acting officials. That's part of my job, being one of representatives of Ukraine in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, meeting and working with American colleagues. So I don't think that there are secret meetings about just kicking out Zelensky or something like this. We can't have elections today. I am not supporter of Zelensky, as you told, and that's true. But I can tell you, we can't have elections. So it's physically impossible. It's not. We don't have elections not because Zelensky tries to avoid them. We don't have elections because it's physically impossible in our security situation.
Even as an opposition MP, Mr. Goncharenko, what do you make of some of the claims? They're largely made on X. They're the kind of claims that are repeated by the likes of Elon Musk. Zelensky is in fact a dictator. He's a warmonger who's prolonging the war unnecessarily. He's forcibly conscripting troops to the front line. He's corrupt. What's your reaction to these claims that seem to be fueling this slightly anti-Ukraine, pro-Russian sentiment among some in the US?
That's very important. And I think not only in the US. First of all, I would like to address to all those people who are not big fans of President Zelensky. I mean, also, I'm not his fan, but Ukraine is not President Zelensky. Ukraine is tens of millions of people who are suffering and dying here every day. Ukraine is also the country which is fighting against awful tyranny, which tries to conquer Europe. Speaking about Russia and Putin. So please don't forget it and don't mess it. I think, by the way, it's one of the mistakes of Zelensky that he embodied in himself completely Ukrainian resilience. At the beginning, it was great because it was easy for understanding of people who maybe even didn't know what is Ukraine and where it is situated. But now it's bad because all questions to him are lying also on Ukraine too. Speaking about dictatorship, he's not dictator. He's democratically elected leader. Do we have problems with democracy in Ukraine? Yes, we do. It's understandable. 3 years of martial law time, you know. It's not the best time for democracy to flourish. But I think Zelensky could be more democratic. There is partly control by the government of the media. There is a lot of pressure on local governance. There is a lot of pressure on opposition. Zelensky is using also sanctioning opposition leaders, which is definitely not right to do. So we have some problems, but they're not so critical to call him dictator. It's very big exaggeration.
Must he return to the White House? We note that he's going to be meeting the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. He's pulling out of those talks, though, and not speaking to US representatives. Is that a mistake?
I don't know. It's quite strange that he's coming there, but then he's leaving, maybe because he wants, like, it's not a presidential level, he thinks. But I don't think it's time for any pride now. And it's time again to deliver and to find how to work with Americans. We can't lose the United States. And we don't have another American president, and we will not have another for 4 years. So we should work with them. By the way, ending our conversation about Zelensky, I think one thing from him would be very right to do now. In 2019, when he ran for the presidency, he promised officially, publicly, that he will never seek for re-election, that he will present one term. I think it's time for him to remind this and to go and say, I will not run again. I will finish this war as democratically elected leader of Ukraine. I will end the war, and then I will organize democratic elections in which I will not take part. And I think it will take off all the questions about dictatorship, all part of the problems with Trump administration, and many, many other things which are absolutely not needed now. And by this, he would show that he is really a statesman, not a politician. We will see.
But where are the Ukrainian people when it comes to a peace deal? Because obviously one man's peace deal could be construed as another man's surrender. If it involves giving territory up to Russia, how will the Ukrainian people react?
We need to define what does it mean to give territory to Russia. Never, ever, any Ukrainian leader will sign anything that these territories are Russian. So our territorial integrity de jure should be secured. This is illegally occupied territories by Russia. But yes, with this level of support from our allies, we can't kick out Russians from our territories. Quite opposite, we are losing a little bit and a little bit, but almost every day. So it means that for some time, our territories will be controlled by Russia. But once again, they are Ukrainian territories. One day, this last colonial empire in Europe, which is Russia, will fall apart, and we will regain control over our territories. That's how I think it's consensus in Ukraine here about this.
Is that credible, though, Mr. Goncharenko? I mean, whoever succeeds Putin surely is going to share his imperial aims.
Definitely. I agree with you. It's not the war of Putin, it's war of Russia. It's very important for everybody to understand. And after the war with Ukraine, Russia is not going to live in peace. They will look for new prey. Maybe it will be Ukraine again if they will feel we're weak, or they will attack in other countries. Is it a sustainable thing? No, it's not. But, you know, there are situations close to this in the world which last for decades already. So we don't know for how long will it last.
OK, and quick final question. Keir Starmer's coalition of the willing, is it enough?
It's great, but it's not enough. Without United States of America, it's not enough.
OK. Mr. Goncharenko, I need to leave it there, but thank you very, very much indeed for joining me today.
Thank
Coming
you.
up next, thank you. Coming up next to mark International Women's Day, I'm going to be speaking to a founding member of the Women's Rights Network, Heather Binning. We're going to be discussing Andrew Tate. Should make for a very interesting conversation. Don't go anywhere.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hello there. Low pressure still dominates western parts of the Mediterranean. Outbreaks of showers, heavy rain, some strong winds as well. Temperatures a little below average for the time of year. Through Monday, showers across the west, some longer spells of rain, Spain and Portugal there. Showers across into Italy, temperatures in the mid-teens. But the best of the dry weather across Greece, across into Turkey as well. Plenty of sunny spells here. And the outlook for is it to improve a little with temperatures rising too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, today, most of us will see another fine and sunny day, and in the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm for the time of year. It's not going to be everywhere, though. The very far north of Scotland, we continue with some cloud and rain here, and also very down towards the very far southwest, could just see a few showery outbreaks of rain from time to time. But for a lot of the UK, lots of sunshine around, and in the sunshine, temperatures will really respond quite widely into the high teens across much of England and Wales, and we could see a few spots reaching 20 degrees, that's 68 in Fahrenheit. As we move into the evening, this band of cloud and rain across the far north of Scotland will gradually begin to sink a little bit further southwards, but for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, it will be a very fine end to the day with some late sunshine. Much of England and Wales also very similar, fine end to the weekend to come. Really, the exceptions are going to be down towards the very far southwest of England, where, again, we could just see a few spots of rain to end Sunday. So moving into the nighttime period, the band of rain across Scotland will continue to sink its way a little bit further south. Behind it, much colder air and also quite a brisk breeze developing. But for a lot of the UK, it's going to be a fairly quiet night. Could see some mist and fog form, especially along some North Sea coasts, and in the countryside it will turn pretty chilly as we start Monday morning. But for a lot of England and Wales, we do start the day fairly bright once any early mist and fog clears, but cloud will begin to bubble up quite widely across the UK during the course of Monday, so much more cloud in the sky compared to the weekend. That band of rain across Scotland will track its way into parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England as the afternoon goes on. Behind it, much, much colder. Temperatures really struggling across Scotland, but still reaching the mid-teens across much of England and Wales.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. I'm joined now by founding member of the Women's Rights Network, Heather Binning. Heather, lovely to see you. And we're speaking because, was it International Women's Day yesterday? Yes, I think it was. We're all
Most
wearing,
of the celebrations
we're
were
all
yesterday.
wearing, this is what a feminist looks like, T-shirt. We're not really, but
suffrage colours.
Suffrage colours, I love that, purple. And we've got a debate raging at the moment about whether women's rights have gone too far. What do you think?
Well, have they gone far enough, Camilla?
Yes.
I would have to say. In some ways, women's rights have advanced significantly, and we can only praise that and be grateful for it. As women, we are grateful for the morsels we do get thrown. However, we still have an awful long way to go, and in certain areas, women's rights have regressed. And there's an objectification of women, and particularly of vulnerable women, that is accepted as part of society and as it should be. So, for instance, I'm thinking about women that are trapped in the porn industry, for instance, that are very often there, not because it's what their objectives and what they set out to do, but they're now being objectified and they're very vulnerable, and rescuing them from their harms and giving them good opportunities. There's an awful long way to go to improve the rights of women across the world.
And also, I suppose, that porn industry has been fuelled by social media, and we'll get onto that in just a minute. And actually, just the objectification of everyday women is another issue. What role has the transgender rights movement played in women's rights? Because I think we just discussed earlier, haven't we seen each other before? We've been, I think I spoke on a panel where obviously we were put in the TERF category.
Yes.
We were questioning children's safeguarding when it came to puberty blockers and things like that. And the next thing we knew, people were shouting at us and calling us bigots. Has the trans movement eroded women's rights to a certain extent?
Significantly. It's significantly eroded. The idea that there's an assumption out there that because we speak for women's rights, then we are against all other rights of individuals, or we have hatred in our hearts, or we are Nazis towards people who may think differently to us, and that's absolutely not the case. For us and for all the women that are members of the network, and we've huge numbers of women coming forward every week to join when they learn about us, is the fact that women now, women's groups, women's organisations, and I'm thinking about the Women's Institute, for instance, or the Fawcett Society, accept women that are biologically, women by by label, but biological men who claim to be women. Now, I have great sympathy for anybody who's seriously struggling to match their mind with their body, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to open the door and welcome them into the women's spaces that we've fought hard for. And there's a large lobby against this, and I'm quite sure that every one of those individuals, when faced with having to arrange for intimate care of their mother, for instance, or their daughter or themselves, know exactly what sex of person they want to be performing and carrying out those tasks. So this is not about being unkind or hating anybody. This is about the reality of looking after women, particularly vulnerable women. And, you know, we do come across it. Yesterday, there were a lot of celebrations across the country for International Women's Day, and a number of our members were out with their groups celebrating and taking part in marches. In at least 3 instances that I know of now, at the moment, there may well be more, they were banned, they were harassed, and by
trans extremists.
By predominantly men, and they may not necessarily be trans extremists. No. I don't know the full details of it, but organising committees who said that, no, we are an anti-inclusive agenda.
Yes.
And I see it as an exclusive agenda, rather, because they are excluding us.
Well, there is an irony there that even if they are men identifying as women, they're still men that could be subjugating women on International Women's Day. That doesn't seem to add up.
It doesn't, does it?
Time is fast running away with us, but can we discuss Andrew Tate? He is now being linked to Carl Gifford, who killed those 3 women, Louise, Hannah and Carol Hunt, in Bushey. Absolutely awful crossbow killings. He had seen Andrew Tate videos beforehand. Now, we can't make any stronger link than that, so let's just leave that criminal case aside for a minute. What's your view on Andrew Tate?
I think Andrew Tate is a symptom, not a cause. Lots of people, I'm sure, have seen it. I absolutely would try and prevent the spread of the messages that he sends, which is the objectification of women. But men were violent towards women and killed women long before Andrew Tate came on the scene. For instance, Oscar Pistorius, you know, he wouldn't have seen Andrew Tate. So I would resist the idea of putting a label that is the fault of Andrew Tate. It is a symptom, and it is a dreadful symptom.
Do you worry about the influence he may have on younger men?
Huge influence that he has. And we need to address the issue of how men and boys are viewing women and girls. And we talked about the porn industry earlier, but it's an objectification. They're seen as things or chattels. Too often, men are aggressive and violent towards their partners. We know that 98% of sexual crimes are committed by men. 97% of women say they've suffered sexual harassment. And 1 in 12 women has suffered violence by their partner. So it's a long-running issue. It's not going away at the moment.
Yes.
It's, he's exploiting that. And
I can hear we're running out of time. I was going to say the counter-narrative to that is that men may have lost their place and therefore they're seeking out people to kind of follow, and Tate might be one of them.
Might be one of them.
But we need to be careful. Heather Binning, we need to leave it there because I'm getting call in my ear, right? You need to wrap up, you need to wrap up. So that's all from me today. What a show we have had, my goodness. I'm going to be back next week at 9:30 as ever, but coming up next, it's the wonderful Michael Portillo. Stay tuned for his show from 11. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. For many, it's a fine Sunday out there, but we'll start to see a change in store, rain arriving from the north and turning colder next week. Taking a look at the bigger picture then, we do have this area of low pressure down towards the south, could just bring in a bit of cloud here, but this is the cold front that will introduce colder air through into Monday. But out there, through much of Sunday, plenty of sunshine on offer, quite hazy at times across the south west of England, but Orkney and Shetland will see some heavier spells of rain, just gradually sinking southwards. Otherwise, as for temperatures, not doing too bad at all in that sunshine, staying on the mild side for the time of year. We may even get 18, 19, possibly 20 degrees across the central parts of England today. So as we go through Sunday evening, heavy spells of rain, especially across parts of Shetland, and this will gradually sink its way southwards. But for the vast majority of Scotland, staying dry into this evening. Likewise,